Hello friends, this is Chanchal Antony from the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, AJIT Mangalore. So today we'll be starting with the fourth module, second chapter, the file system, part 2. Okay. So in the previous part we have gone through what are all the file concepts, including the attributes, the operations, the access rights, and what are the different file types and what are the different access modes through which we can access the files. Okay. And the directory structure, that means a single level, two level, a tree level structure, tree structured, and an acyclic graph. So these are all the topics which we had covered in the previous session. Okay, so next slide we'll see what are all the topics that we'll be covering in today's session. So in the today's session we'll be going through the file system mounting, how the mounting is done before a file system is or when a file is created, or when you want to open a file, how the mounting is done, and file sharing, and the last topic would be protection. So in the protection also we need to understand how the protection is done based on the different criteria, like how to set a permission, how to access a permission, how to give a specific permission for user, group, and all those things. Okay? So all those topics we will be covering it in the protection part of the day. Starting with the file system mounting, so we know that whenever a file must be opened, okay, or whenever we want to use a file, we first need to open the file. Okay, so we need to search where is the location of the file, and from finding out where is the location of the file, we open it. Okay, so a file system must be mounted before it can be available for the process on the system. Okay, and more specifically, what happens is the directory structure can be built out of a multiple volumes which must be mounted to make them available within the file system namespace. The mount procedure is a straightforward method. So the operating system is given the name of the device that needs to be mounted and the mount point to which it has to be mounted. Okay, so that means the location within the file structure where the file system is to be attached. So typically what happens is a mount point is an empty directory. Now for instance, on a Unix system, the file system contains a user's home directory. It might be mounted with /home/user. Okay, now to access the directory structure within the file system, we must precede the directory name with the /home as /home followed by the directory which you want to mount it. So mounting the file system under /user. Now for example, /home/user is what we are trying to mount it. The /user would result in the path such that /user/ the name of the file what you are mounting. Okay, which we could see to reach the same directory. Okay, now just look at the diagram here. Now for example, you have a directory. Now the / what you can see, first one is an unmounted mounted directory, the second one is the unmounted directory. Okay, now the second diagram, now you can see there a /. So / indicates it is a root directory. Okay, so when it is a root directory, what happens is you need to start always the directory path starts with the root name. So root we indicate with the /. So /user, then under user you have got bill and thread. Okay, so this is a mounted one. Now for example, you want to mount an unmounted one. Now what you can see here in the B part is nothing but an unmounted one. Okay, so now what we try to do, we need to mount an unmounted structure. So now for example, if under user, if you are trying to mount the unmounted one, now for example, Jane, prog and doc. Okay, these three are the this is the file system what you want to mount it. So what happens is it will be /user/ instead of thread you are unmounting thread, and what you are trying to do, you are mounting Jane here. So the entire Jane will be visible there. The file system or the directory structure which is under Jane will be visible. Okay, so this is how we try to mount it. Now to illustrate the file mounting, you can just consider the file system example which is given here. Okay, where the triangles represent the subtrees of the directories that are of the interest. Okay, now as I told you, the first one shows the unmounted mounted one, and second one shows the unmounted volume. So now what happens is, at this point only the files on the existing system can be accessed. Now if the volume is an unmounted, the file system is restored to the situation. Okay, it's a regular situation. Now system imposes semantics to clarify the functionality. Now for example, a system may disallow a mount over a directory that contains files, or it may make the mounted file system available at that directory and obscure the directory's existing files until the file system is unmounted. That means terminating the use of the file system and allowing access to the original files in that directory. So one more example what we can take is a system may allow the same file system to be mounted repeatedly, okay, at different mount points. It depends, because a directory structure or entire mounted file system will have different multiple mount points. So what we are trying to do, a system may allow the same file system to be mounted repeatedly at different mount points, or it may allow only one mount per file system. So it depends upon what kind of mounting we are trying to do and how it has been mounted, and what is the entire matter between the mounting part. So it depends upon what structure we are trying to mount it, and whether it contains certain constraints or any constraints are present, that we need to check it. Okay, related to mounting. Moving on to the file sharing. So in the previous part what we discussed, we explored the motivation of the file sharing and some of the difficulties involved in allowing users to share the file. So such file sharing is very desirable for users who want to collaborate and reduce the effort required to achieve the computing goal. Therefore, the user-oriented operating system must accommodate the need to share files in spite of the inherent difficulty. So what we try to do is, in this session, that means in the current session of the file sharing, we examine more aspects of file sharing, and we begin by discussing the general issues that arise when multiple users share the files. And once the multiple users are allowed to share the file, the challenge is to extend sharing the multiple file system, including remote file system, and we also discuss the challenge. Okay. Now we also consider what to do after what to do about the conflicting actions occurring in the shared file. Now for instance, we can see that if multiple users are writing to a file, should all the writes be allowed to occur, or should the operating system protect the user action from one another? So these are all the things that we will be discussing, and we will have to keep it in mind while we discuss or go through the concept of file sharing. When discussing regarding multiple users, when an operating system accommodates multiple users, the issue of the sharing, file naming and file protection becomes a preeminent issue. So given a directory structure that allows files to be shared by various users, the system must mediate the file sharing. The system can either allow a user to access the file of other users, or by default, or require that specifically grant access to the files that are given to the user. So to implement sharing and protection, the system must maintain more file and directory attributes that are needed on a single user system. Although many approaches have been taken to this requirement historically, most systems have evolved to use the concept of file or directory, owner or user, and group. Okay. So the owner is the user who can change the attributes and grant access, and who has the most control over the file. The group attribute defines a subset of users who can share the access of the file. Now for example, the owner of the file on a Unix system can use all operations on the file, while the member of a file group can execute one subset of this operation. So these are all the permissions what we set, and all other users can execute another subset of an operation. So exactly which operations can be executed by group members and other users is definable by the file's owner. So more details regarding this permission of the attributes and all those things will be discussed, or you can look into the later chapters or later topics. The owner and the group IDs of a given file or directories are stored within other file attributes. When a user requests an operation on a file, the user IDs can be compared with the owner attributes to determine if the requesting user is the owner of the file. Likewise, the group ID can also be compared. So the result indicates which permissions are applicable, and the system then applies those permissions to the requested operation and allows or denies it. So many systems have multiple local file system, including the volumes of a single disk or multiple volumes of multiple attached disks. So in this cases, the ID checking and the permission matchings are straightforward once the file systems are mounted. Okay, so this is related to the file sharing part, where permission, the user IDs, group IDs, everything must be properly noted and taken down. Next is the remote file system. With the advent of networks, communication among remote computers became possible. So the networking allows the sharing of the resources spread across the campus or even around the world. Okay, it depends upon what kind of network we are dealing with. So one obvious resource to share is the data in the form of files. So through the evolution of networking and file technology, remote file sharing methods have changed. The first implemented method involved manually transferring files from machine via programs like FTP. The second major method uses a distributed file system, we also call it as DFS, okay, in which remote directories are visible from a local machine. So in some ways, the third method, that is nothing but the World Wide Web, WWW, is the reversion of the first. A browser is needed to gain access to the remote files, and separate operations, essentially a wrapper for FTP, are used to transfer files. FTP is used for both anonymous and authenticated access. So anonymous access allows a user to transfer file without having an account on a remote system. The World Wide Web uses anonymous file exchange almost exclusively. So the DFS, that is the distributed file system, involves a much tighter integration between the machine that is accessing the remote files and the machine providing the system. So in a client server model, the remote file system allows the computer to mount one or more file systems from one or more remote machines seeking access, system from one or more remote machines. So what happens is, in this case, the machine containing the files in the server and the machine seeking access to the files is the client. The client server relationship is common with networked machine. So generally, the server declares that a resource is available to clients and specifies exactly the resources, that means in case which files are and exactly which client. Now for example, like in a Google Classroom, we are creating a specific classroom to a specific class, then we are giving a password for them to log in, and then what we try to do, we are posting assignments, notes and all those things, which is only specific to that students who belong to that group, right? So generally a server declares that a resource is available to the clients and specifies exactly which resource, okay, that is something which is needed, okay, and exactly which clients also. A server and clients. So when you deal with the concept of the client server model, the server can serve multiple clients and the client can use multiple servers depending upon the implementation details of a given client server facility. The server usually specifies the available files on the volume or directory level. So the client identification is more difficult. So now what happens is, a client can be specified by a network name or other identifier such as an IP address, but this can be spoofed or imitated. So this is something which we have studied in the previous topic, where hacking happens, okay, or spoofing. So as a result of spoofing, an unauthorized client could be allowed access to the server. This is nothing but intrusion detection or intrusion part. So more secure solution include secure authentication of the client via encrypted keys, something related to cryptography. Unfortunately, the security with the security it comes many challenges, including ensuring the compatibility of the client and server, and the security of the key exchanges. Okay, so there are different security key exchange algorithms that we will be studying in cryptography. Because of the difficulty of solving this problem, unsecure authentication methods are most commonly used. Okay. Then in a distributed information system, so till now we were dealing with the client server system. So in a distributed information system, to make client server system easier to manage, a distributed information system, that is nothing but DIS, known as the distributed naming service, provide unified access to the information needed for remote computing. The domain name system DNS provides host name to network address translation for the entire internet, including the web. Okay. Now, other distributed information system provide user name, password, user ID, group ID, space for the distributed facility. So Unix systems have employed a wide variety of distributed information method. Now, for example, we just see of a Sun Microsystem introduced Yellow Pages. Okay. It is now renamed as Network Information System, or NIS, and most of the industry adopted its use. It centralizes the storage of usernames, host names, and printer information, and likewise. Unfortunately, it uses unsecure authentication methods, including sending users password unencrypted, that means in a clear text format. Now, for example, if your password is ABC, they don't encrypt it, they will send it as ABCs. Okay. And identifying host by IP address. So now what happened was, in the case of Microsoft Common Internet File System, CIFS, network information is used in conjunction with their authentication. Authentication is either the username and password to create a network login that the server uses to decide whether to allow or deny the access to the requested file system. Okay. Now here we have got something called as a domain, an Active Directory, then a lightweight directory access protocol, okay, which are mainly dealt with the concept of directory. Okay. Now the industry is moving towards the use of a lightweight directory access protocol. We also call it as LDAP, okay, as a secure distributed naming mechanism. Okay. In fact, Active Directory is based on LDAP. Starting with the file sharing failure modes, the local file system can fail for a variety of reasons, including the failure of the disk containing the file system, corruption of the directory structure, or other disk management information, collectively called as the metadata. The disk controller failure or the cable failure or also the host adapter failure. So the user or the system administrator failure can also cause files to be lost or entire directories or volumes to be deleted. So many of these failures will cause a host to crash and an error condition to be displayed, and human intervention will be required to repair the damage. So the remote file system have even more failure modes. Because of the complexity of network systems and the required interactions between the remote machine, many more problems can interfere with the proper operation of the remote file system. So in the case of networks, the network can be interrupted between two hosts. So such interruption can result from hardware failure, a poor hardware configuration, or networking implementation issues. Although some network have built resiliency, including multiple paths between the host, many do not. So any single failure can thus interrupt the follow of DFS method, that is nothing but the distributed file system. Okay. So now to implement this kind of recovery from failure, some kind of state information may be maintained on both the client and the server. Now if both the server and the client maintain knowledge of their current activities and open files, then they can seamlessly recover from a failure. Now in the situation where the server crashes, but must recognize that it has remotely mounted exported file system and open files. The NFS takes a simple approach, implementing a stateless DFS. In essence, it assumes that a client request for a file read or write would not have occurred unless the file system have been remotely mounted and the file has been previously opened. So the NFS protocol carries all the information needed to locate the appropriate file and perform the requested operation. Similarly, it does not track which clients have exported volume mounted against assuming that if a request comes in, it must be legitimate. While this stateless approach makes the NFS resilient and rather easy to implement, it also makes it unsecure. Okay. Moving on with the file sharing, the consistency semantics. The consistency semantics represents an important criterion for evaluating any file system that supports file sharing. So this semantics specify how multiple users of a system are to access a shared file simultaneously. So in particular, they specify which modification of data by one user will be observable by other users. So this semantics are typically implemented as a code with the file system. Consistency semantics are directly related to the process synchronization algorithm. However, the complex algorithm of that chapter tend not to be implemented in case of file I/O because of the great latencies and slow transfer rate of disk and networks. Now, for example, performing an atomic transaction to a remote disk could involve several network communication and several disk reads and writes, or both. Now, systems that attempt such a full set of functionalities tend to perform poorly. Now, a successful implementation of complex sharing semantics can be found in an Andrew file system. We also call it as AFS. Okay. Now, when a Unix semantics, that is nothing but a Unix file system, uses the following consistency semantics. That indicates write to an open file by a user are visible immediately to other users that have this file open. Okay. So now, one mode of sharing allows the users to share the pointer of the current location onto the file or into the file, thus advancing of the pointer by one user affects all sharing users. Hence, here a file has a single image that interleaves all accesses regardless of their origin. Now, in the Unix semantics, a file is associated with a single file, a physical image that is accessed as an exclusive resource. Now, the Andrew file system AFS, okay, in this the session semantics uses the following consistency semantics. So now, write to an open file by a user are not visible immediately to other users that have a same file open. Okay, but in Unix it is visible. Once a file is closed, the changes made to it are visible only in session starting later. Already open instances of the file do not reflect this changes. So according to this semantics, a file may be associated temporarily with several images at the same time. Consequently, multiple users are allowed to perform both read and write access concurrently on this or on their images of the file without any delay. Okay. The last small topic in file sharing is immutable shared file semantics, where a unique approach is that of an immutable shared files. So once a file is declared as shared by its creator, it cannot be modified. And an immutable file that has two key properties. First one is its name may not be reused and its content may not be altered. Thus, the name of an immutable file signifies that the content of the file are fixed. Okay. The last topic of this chapter is protection. Okay, so as the name itself suggests, you have to try to protect the file systems and directories. Okay. Now, when the information is stored in a computer system, we want to keep it safe from the physical damage, something related to reliability and improper access. That is nothing but protection. Okay. Now, when we deal with the concept of reliability, it is generally provided by duplicate copies of a file. That means if something goes wrong, we will have a copy of it. So many computers have a system program that automatically copies the disk file to tape at regular intervals. That means once per day or in a week or a month and all those things to maintain a copy should a file system be accidentally destroyed. Okay. The file system can be damaged by hardware problems such as error in reading or writing, power surges or failure or power fluctuation that happens, the head crashes of the disk, dirt, temperature extremes, and vandalism. So file may be deleted accidentally. So bugs in the file system software can also cause the file contents to be lost. Okay, so protection can be provided in many ways. For a small single user system, we might provide protection by physically removing the floppy disk and locking them in a desk drawer or in a file cabinet. In a multi-user system, however, other mechanisms are needed. Okay. Now, next moving on to types of access. The need to protect files is the direct result of the ability to access the file. The systems that do not permit access to the files of other users do not need protection. Thus, we could provide complete protection by prohibiting access. Alternatively, we could provide free access with no protection. Both approaches are too extreme for general use. So, what is needed is the controlled access. So, protection mechanism provide controlled access by limiting the types of file access that can be made. So the access is permitted or denied depending on the several factors, one of which is the type of access requested. So several different types of operations may be controlled. The first one is read operation, that is nothing but read from a file. Write operation is write or rewrite the file, content of the file. Execute is nothing but load the file into the memory and execute it. Append is write new information at the end of the file, or you are trying to add the content onto the file. Okay, so that is something called as append. Then delete the file and free its space for possible reuse. And list the name and attributes of a file. Okay, now other operations such as renaming, copying, and editing the file may also be controlled. So for many systems, however, these higher level functions may be implemented by a system program and makes lower level system calls. Okay, and the protection is provided only at the lower level. Now, for instance, copying a file may be implemented simply by a sequence of read requests. So in this case, a user with read access can also cause the file to be copied, printed, and so on. So many protection mechanisms have been proposed. Each has advantages and disadvantages and must be appropriate for its intended application. A small computer system that is used by only a few members of the group, okay, may not need the same type of protection as a large corporate computer that is used for research, finance, and personal operations. Okay. Now, when we deal with the concept of protection, we need to see to that the files or the directory structure is properly handled with. Moving with the access control part, the most common approach to the protection problem is to make access dependent on the identity of the user. The different users may need different types of access to a file or directory. So the most general scheme to implement identity dependent access is to associate with each file and directory an access control list. Okay, we also call it as ACL. So specifying the user names and the types of access allowed for each user. Now, when a user requests access to the particular file, the operating system checks the access list associated with the file. Now, if the user is listed for the requested access, the access is allowed. Otherwise, a protection violation occurs and the user job is denied access to the file. Okay. Now, this approach has the advantage of enabling complex access methodologies, and the main problem with the access list is their length. Okay. If you want to allow everyone to read a file, we must list all users with read access. So this technique has two undesirable consequences. So constructing such a list may be tedious and unrewarding task, especially if you do not know in advance the list of users in the system. The directory entry previously a fixed size now needs to be of variable size, resulting in more complicated space management. These problems can be resolved by the use of condensed version of the access list. Now, to condense the length of the access control list, Many systems recognize three classification of users in connection with each file. First one is owner. The user who created the file is the owner. The next we have a group. A set of users who are sharing the file and need similar access is a group or work group, and universe, or also we call it as the public. All the users who in the system constitute the universe or public. Okay. Now the most common or the recent approach is to combine the access control list with the more general owner, group and universe access control scheme that is described. Okay. Now the three categories of access by default are used, but allow access control list to be added to specific files and directories when more fine grained access control is desired. Okay. Now we can see here in the content where they have given three classes: owner access, group access and public access. Okay. Now there are numbers that are specified around that: 7, 6 and 1. Okay. Now what does 7, 6 indicate is R indicates read, W indicates write and X indicates execute. So read, write, execute. Okay. So now if it is a read option, okay, if it is only read option, we give the value will be 4. If it is only write option, the value will be 2, and if it is only execute, it will be 1. Okay. So if it is read and write and execute, it will be 4 plus 2 plus 1, it is 7. So the permission what we are setting it as 7. So this part you will understand when you study the Unix part. Okay. And read and write option only if you are setting, we will give it as the access 6, and only execute it is access 1. Okay. So now generally what happens is for public access, this is small change, we never give much executing, we only give them the read option. For the group we give read and write. Okay. And for owner we give the group access to read, write and execute. Okay. So now if you want to create a group, initially you need to have a manager who can manage or who can take care of the group. So he has to create a group with a unique name and add the users onto the group. So this is something related to the security part. Okay, in the protection. Now another approach to the protection problem is to associate a password with each file. Now just as access to the computer system is often controlled by a password, access to each file can be controlled in the same way. Now but the problem is, if the passwords are chosen randomly and changed often, this scheme may be effective in limiting the access to the file, because there may be chances where we may forget the password, because so many number of files when we have, the number of passwords also increases. So the use of passwords has a few disadvantages. However, okay, first, the number of passwords that a user needs to remember may become large, making the scheme impractical. Okay, and the second thing is, if only one password is used for all the files, then once it is discovered, what happens, all the files are accessible and the protection is on an all or none basis, because if it is protected, what will happen, we can keep track of it. If it is not protected, that means if the password is there, the files are protected. If the password is gone, the files are not protected at all. So this is a part of it. Okay. So some systems allow a user to associate a password with the subdirectory rather than the individual file to deal with this problem. Okay. Thank you.